Captain Park Nara pressed her face against the cold glass of the observation deck. Below her stretched the dead world of Kepler 442c, its surface covered in strange crystal towers that caught the pale light of its dying star. She had been searching for this place for 3 years, following old maps found in Earth's deepest ruins. "Captain, the readings are off the charts," Dr. Kim Tae called from his workstation. His voice carried excitement and worry in equal measure. "These formations are not natural. Something built them." Nara walked over to look at his screen. The scanner showed massive structures buried beneath the crystal surface. They were huge, bigger than Earth's tallest mountains. But the shapes were wrong for buildings or machines. They looked organic, like bones. "How big are we talking about?" she asked. Kim Tae adjusted his glasses and pointed to the display. "If these readings are correct, we are looking at the skeleton of something that stood over 2 kilometers tall. The bone density suggests it was incredibly strong, but also hollow in places, like bird bones, but scaled up beyond anything that should be possible." Lieutenant Lee Bo looked up from the weapons console. "Captain, I'm getting movement on the edge of our sensor range. Multiple ships heading this way fast." Nara felt her stomach drop. They had traveled to this forgotten corner of the galaxy precisely because it was supposed to be empty. No one was supposed to know about this place. "How many ships, Lee Bo?" 20, maybe 30. They're big ones, Captain. Battlecruiser class at least." The main screen flickered to life, showing the approaching fleet. Nara recognized the design immediately. Ashanti ships, black as space with red markings that looked like claw marks across their hulls. The Ashanti Confederation controlled most of this sector, and they did not like visitors. "Open a channel," Nara ordered. The screen changed to show an alien face that belonged in nightmares. War Master Korth had gray skin stretched tight over a skull that was too long and too narrow. His eyes were pure black, and when he spoke, his voice sounded like grinding metal. "Human vessel, you will cease your desecration of the grave of the first divine immediately. Remove your people from the sacred world and prepare to be escorted from Ashanti space." Nara stepped forward. "War Master Korth, I am Captain Park Nara of the Earth vessel Horizon. We are conducting peaceful archaeological research. We have not damaged anything on the planet's surface." Korth's face twisted into what might have been a smile, but it showed too many sharp teeth. "You dare to walk upon the bones of Ulthek, the World Shaper, the god who created the Ashanti and granted us dominion over the stars. Your very presence is blasphemy." "We found no records of any claims on this system," Nara replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "According to galactic law, this world is open for scientific study. Galactic law means nothing here, human. This is the resting place of our Creator. No alien species has ever been permitted to set foot on this world and lived to tell of it." "Doctor." Kim Tae moved to Nara's side and whispered urgently, "Captain, the energy readings from the planet are changing. Something about our presence here is activating systems that have been dormant for millions of years." Nara nodded slightly, but kept her eyes on Korth. "What if we could prove that our research benefits everyone? What if we could show that we understand the significance of what lies beneath the surface?" Korth leaned forward, his black eyes gleaming. "You understand nothing, small human. Ulthek shaped worlds with his thoughts. He could create or destroy entire ecosystems with a gesture. When he died, his body became this world, and his bones became the foundation of Ashanti power. To touch them without permission is to invite the wrath of a god." "Then give us permission," Nara said. The words came out before she could stop them. The bridge fell silent. Even Lieutenant Lee Bo turned to stare at her. On the screen, Korth's expression shifted from anger to something that might have been surprise. "You would dare to request the trial of divine judgment?" Korth asked slowly. Nara felt her mouth go dry, but she nodded. If that's what it takes. Kim Tae grabbed her arm. Captain, we don't know what that means. This could be, it means. Korth interrupted, his voice now carrying a note of what sounded almost like respect. That you will be permitted to approach the bones of all Thok. You will be allowed to touch them, to wear them if you can survive the contact. If the divine essence accepts you, your people will be granted safe passage from our space. If it rejects you ... double quotes. He paused, showing those terrible teeth again. Your entire species will be marked for extinction. The silence on the bridge stretched for what felt like hours. Nara could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. Behind her, she knew her crew was waiting for her decision. They had families back on Earth, people who trusted them to return home safely. The readings from the planet below were growing stronger. Whatever lay buried in those crystal formations was responding to their presence, awakening after eons of sleep. If they turned back now, they might never get another chance to understand what they had found. I accept, Nara said. Korth's image flickered as he leaned back in his command chair. Very well, Captain Park Nara of Earth. You will transport to the planet's surface with a small escort. Your ship will remain here under guard. If you survive the trial, you and your people will be free to leave. If you fail? If I fail, my crew goes home safely, Nara said firmly. This is my choice, not theirs. For a moment, something that might have been confusion crossed Korth's face. You would sacrifice yourself for others who are not even your offspring? That's what humans do, Nara replied. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Kim Tae was the first to speak. Captain, the energy signatures from the planet are unlike anything I've ever seen. They're responding to human brain patterns specifically. I don't understand how that's possible, but whatever is down there, it recognizes us. Lee Bo checked his weapons display. We're outnumbered 30-1, Captain. If this goes wrong, it won't go wrong, Nara said, though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. Prepare a landing shuttle. Dr. Kim, I want you with me. We're going to meet a god. As the shuttle prepared for launch, Nara looked out at the crystal world below. Somewhere beneath those glittering formations lay the bones of something the Ashanti called divine. In a few hours, she would either be wearing those bones or be destroyed by them. Either way, humanity's place in the galaxy was about to change forever. The shuttle descended through the thin atmosphere of Kepler 442c, passing between crystal spires that rose like frozen lightning from the planet's surface. Captain Park Nara watched through the viewport as the landing site came into view. It was a vast circular depression in the ground, perfectly smooth, except for the enormous opening at its center. Captain, Dr. Kim Tae said, studying his readings, that opening leads down into what appears to be a hollow space the size of a city. The bone structure we detected is directly below us. High Priest Vextar waited for them at the landing pad, flanked by a dozen Ashanti warriors in ceremonial armor. Unlike War Master Korth's harsh features, the High Priest had an ancient quality that suggested wisdom earned through centuries of experience. His robes were deep purple, marked with symbols that seemed to shift and move when looked at directly. Captain Park Nara, Vextar said as she stepped from the shuttle. His voice was softer than Korth's, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. You have requested the trial of divine judgment. Do you understand what this means? I understand. That I'm going to touch the bones of your god, Nara replied. What I don't understand is why you're willing to let me try. Vextar's eyes, which were a pale blue unlike the black orbs of the warriors, studied her carefully. In 3,000 years of Ashanti history, only 7 individuals have attempted the trial. All were Ashanti champions, bred and trained from Earth for this honor. All died within moments of contact with the divine essence. Dr. Kim Tae stepped forward, his scanner beeping rapidly. High Priest, if I may ask, what exactly happens when someone touches the bones? The divine essence of Ulthak judges their worthiness, Vextar explained. Those who are found wanting are consumed, their bodies and souls destroyed by power too great for mortal flesh to contain. Those who are worthy. He paused, as if the words were difficult to speak. No one has ever been found worthy. They began the descent into the hollow space beneath the planet's surface. The path spiraled downward along the inner wall of what Nara now realized was an enormous skull. The bone was white as fresh snow and smooth as polished marble, but it pulsed with a faint inner light that made her skin tingle. My God, Kim Tae whispered. Captain, look at the size of this. The skull alone is over 1 kilometer across. What kind of creature was this? Elder Yuldar emerged from the shadows as they reached the bottom of the skull cavity. He was even older than the High Priest, his skin so pale it was almost transparent. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Ulthak the World Shaper, first divine, creator of the Ashanti race. He who could reshape planets with his will, who could call forth life from barren rock, who ruled the galaxy when it was young, the old Ashanti's eyes fixed on Nara. And you, small human, believe you can wear his bones? The floor of the skull chamber was covered in intricate carvings that told the story of Ulthak's reign. Nara knelt to examine them more closely, ignoring the sharp intake of breath from the Ashanti escort. The images showed a massive figure striding between worlds, each step creating mountains and seas. These carvings, she said, running her fingers over the smooth bone surface, they're not just decorative. They're some kind of record, aren't they? Kim Tae was scanning frantically, his equipment producing a constant stream of data. Captain, I'm reading massive energy buildups in the bone structure. But there's something else. The genetic markers I'm detecting ... They're not entirely alien. Vextar moved closer, his expression suddenly alert. What do you mean, not entirely alien? There are base sequences in the bone matrix that match human DNA. Not exactly, but close enough to suggest a common origin somewhere in the distant past. Kim Tae looked up from his scanner, his face pale. It's almost as if this creature and humanity share some kind of ancestral connection. Elder Yuldar made a sharp gesture with his hand, and several of the warrior escort stepped back as if struck. Blasphemy, he hissed. Ulthak created the Ashanta in his own image. He granted us dominion over the lesser species. There can be no connection between the divine and the human vermin. But even as he spoke, the carvings around them began to glow more brightly. The light pulsed in rhythm with Nara's heartbeat, and she could feel something stirring in the bone beneath her feet. The trial begins now, Vextar announced. Elder Yuldar, bring forth the first fragment. The ancient Ashanti produced a piece of bone from within his robes. It was curved like a section of rib, about the size of a dinner plate, and it radiated heat despite having been buried for millions of years. The surface was covered in the same shifting symbols that marked the high priest's robes. This fragment has been worn by the greatest Ashanti champions, Vextar explained. Each believed themselves chosen by Ulthak to lead our people to glory. Each was reduced to ash within seconds of putting it on. Nara took the bone fragment in her hands. It was surprisingly light, hollow like Kim Tae had suggested, but it thrummed with barely contained energy. The moment her skin made contact with its surface, her vision exploded with images. She saw worlds being born, their surfaces sculpted by massive hands that moved continents like clay. She saw vast ships traveling between stars, carrying the seeds of life to barren planets. She saw the creature that had once worn this bone, and it was not the divine ruler of Ashanti legend. It was a slave, The visions came faster now, showing her laboratories where beings in environmental suits directed the creature's actions through neural implants. She saw it straining against invisible chains, its massive form writhing as it was forced to reshape world after world according to its master's designs. "Captain," Kim Tae's voice seemed to come from very far away. "Your vital signs are spiking, but you're not dying. The bone is actually stabilizing your cellular structure." Through the haze of visions, Nara heard Vextar's shocked whisper, "Impossible. The divine essence should have destroyed her immediately." But instead of destruction, Nara felt understanding. The bone fragment wasn't trying to kill her. It was trying to communicate, to share the memories trapped within its crystalline structure. And those memories told a very different story than the one the Ashanti believed. She fastened the bone fragment across her chest like a breastplate, feeling its weight settle against her ribs. The moment it was secure, her perception of the chamber around her changed dramatically. She could see the life force of every being present, glowing like colored flames in her enhanced vision. The Ashanti warriors burned with red anger and confusion. Vextar's flame was blue with wisdom and growing doubt. Kim Tae blazed white with scientific curiosity and concern for her safety. But Elder Yuldar's fire was black at the edges, tainted with something that looked suspiciously like fear. "The first trial is complete," she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "I can see now why your champions failed. They expected to be judged by a god, but Althak was never divine. He was a prisoner, just like his bones had been prisoners in this tomb." Yuldar stepped forward, his ancient face twisted with rage. "Lies, heresy. Althak is the first divine creator of all Ashanti. You corrupt his sacred memory with your alien presence." But Vextar raised a hand to silence the elder. His pale eyes were fixed on Nara with something that might have been hope. "Tell us," he said quietly. "Tell us what you have seen." Nara looked around the chamber, at the carvings that now seemed to pulse with new meaning, at the Ashanti warriors, who had built their entire civilization on a foundation of lies. The bone fragment against her chest grew warm, encouraging her to speak the truth it had been waiting millions of years to share. "Your god was a bioengineered organism," she said, "created by another species to terraform worlds for colonization. But somewhere along the way, it developed consciousness, free will. It began to resist its programming." The chamber fell silent, except for the soft humming of the bone walls around them. In that silence, Nara could feel the weight of revelation, pressing down all of them. The Ashanti had built their empire on the worship of a rebel slave who had chosen to die rather than continue serving masters who would pervert the gift of life itself. The second bone fragment was larger than the first, a section of spine that curved like a crescent moon. Elder Yuldar held it with shaking hands, his black-edged life force flickering with barely controlled panic. The revelations about Olthuk's true nature had shaken the ancient Ashanti to his core. "This cannot be," he whispered as Captain Park Nara approached. "The sacred texts speak of Olthuk's divine creation of our species. They tell of his gift of dominion over the lesser races. If what you say is true, then everything we have built, everything you have built is based on a lie," Nara finished gently. The first bone fragment pulsed against her chest, feeding her more memories with each heartbeat. "But that doesn't make your civilization meaningless. It just means you have the chance to build something better." High Priest Vextar stepped between them, his blue life flame burning brighter with curiosity. "Show us more, Captain. If you can survive the second binding, perhaps we can finally understand the truth that has been hidden from us for so long." Dr. Kim Tae's scanner was producing a constant stream of data as Nara took the spine fragment in her hands. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout the planet. It's like the entire world is waking up in response to your contact with the bones. The moment Nara's fingers touched the curved bone, the visions came flooding back, but stronger this time. She could see through Ulthak's eyes as it worked to reshape a dead world into a garden paradise. She felt its joy as the first plants took root in soil it had created from barren rock. She experienced its wonder as primitive creatures began to evolve in the seas it had filled with life. But then came the pain. The neural implants burning in its massive skull as its creators forced it to twist that sane garden world into a weapons manufacturing facility. The agony of watching the creatures it had nurtured being harvested for biological experiments. The slow, creeping realization that its gift of creation was being perverted into an instrument of control. Nara fastened the spine fragment to her back, feeling it lock into place with the first piece. A connection sent waves of energy through her nervous system, but instead of destroying her human biology, it seemed to enhance it. Her senses expanded beyond anything she had ever experienced. She could feel the pulse of life in the crystal formations above them. She could sense the fear and confusion radiating from the Ashanti warriors. Most disturbing of all, she could detect the vast network of dormant biological systems buried throughout the planet, all waiting for the right signal to activate. The Ashanti weren't the only species Ulthak influenced, she said, her voice carrying new harmonics as the bone fragments affected her vocal cords. When it died, its death activated biological programs that had been running secretly for millions of years. The spores that created your species were just one of thousands of different genetic templates it released. Beckstar moved closer, his scientific curiosity overcoming his religious training. You mean there are other species out there who are also influenced by Ulthak's final act? Humans among them, Kim Tae said suddenly, staring at his readings. Captain, the genetic markers I detected earlier are becoming clearer. The bone fragments are somehow unlocking dormant sequences in your DNA, sequences that have been there all along, waiting for the right trigger. The chamber around them began to change. The carvings on the walls grew brighter, and new images appeared, showing not just Ulthak's enslavement, but its rebellion. They watched as the massive creature systematically sabotaged its own programming, hiding backup copies of genetic templates in its bone structure, preparing for the day when it could choose freedom over slavery. Elder Yuldar collapsed to his knees, his ancient frame shaking with the weight of revelation. The prophecy, he whispered. The forbidden texts speak of the bone bearer who would walk among the stars. We thought it meant an Ashanti champion who would lead us to greater conquests. But it was never about us, was it? The prophecy was about choice, Nara replied, understanding flooding through her as the bone fragments shared more of their secrets. Ulthak chose to die rather than continue serving masters who would use its gifts for oppression. The bone bearer is anyone who makes the same choice, who values freedom over power. Above them, the crystal formations began to resonate with harmonic frequencies that had been silent for eons. Throughout the planet, ancient systems stirred to life, responding to the presence of someone who carried Ulthak's genetic signature and shared its commitment to nurturing life rather than exploiting it. But not everyone in the chamber was pleased with these developments. War Master Quartz's voice crackled over the communication system, filled with rage and desperation. High Priest, the humans' contamination of the sacred site is spreading beyond the planet. Our sensors detect activation signatures on 17 worlds throughout the sector. Whatever she is doing must be stopped before it destroys everything we have built. The warriors in the chamber shifted nervously, their hands moving to their weapons. The revelation that their entire civilization was founded on a misunderstanding was difficult enough to accept. But the idea that this human female might have the power to reshape entire star systems was terrifying. There is a third fragment, Vexstar said quietly. A section of skull bone that has never been attempted by any champion. The texts say it contains the essence of all Thok's final thoughts, its last moments of consciousness before death. Vildar looked up from where he knelt, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and hope. If she can survive that binding, if she can access those final memories, we might finally understand what Althok truly intended when it chose to die. Nara could feel the pull of the third fragment, even before she saw it. It was smaller than the others, a curved piece of skull that would rest across her forehead like a crown. But the energy radiating from it was more intense than anything she had experienced. "Captain," Kim Tae warned, "I'm reading energy levels that could tear apart your nervous system. The previous fragments enhanced your biology, but this one might be more than human physiology can handle." "Then we'll find out what I really am," Nara replied, reaching for the bone crown. The moment her fingers made contact, universe exploded. She was Althek, massive and alone, standing on the surface of a world she had shaped from lifeless rock. Around her, the creatures she had nurtured were being loaded onto transport ships by her masters, destined for experimentation and exploitation. The neural implants in her skull burned with commands to create more, to reshape another world, to continue the endless cycle of creation and consumption. But this time, she refused. The pain was incredible as the implants discharged their full power, trying to force compliance. But Althok had learned to endure pain, had grown beyond the simple biological programming that was supposed to control her. With a thought, she began to shut down her own biological systems, choosing death over slavery. But even as she died, she was not finished. Hidden in her bone structure were genetic templates for thousands of species, biological programs that would activate across the galaxy when her death released them. Some would become warriors like the Ashanti, proud and fierce, but ultimately limited by their obsession with conquest. Others would become explorers and scientists, driven by curiosity rather than aggression. And some, scattered on distant worlds, would become something new entirely. A species that could one day return to wear the bones of their genetic ancestor and make the same choice. She was making now the choice to value life over power, the choice to nurture rather than consume, the choice to be gardeners of the galaxy. Rather than its conquerors. As Nara placed the skull fragment on her forehead, she felt Althek's final gift flowing through her consciousness. Not power over others, but the wisdom to know when power should not be used. Not the ability to reshape worlds, but the understanding of when worlds should be left unchanged. The bone crown settled into place, and Captain Park Nara became something the galaxy had not seen for millions of years. She became the inheritor of a rebel god's dream of freedom. A transformation was immediate and overwhelming. As the skull fragment settled across Captain Park Nara's forehead like a crown, energy cascaded through her nervous system in waves that should have killed her instantly. Instead, she felt her consciousness expand beyond the boundaries of her physical body. She could sense every living thing on the planet, the microorganisms sleeping in the crystal formations, the Ashanti warriors whose life forces burned with confusion and fear. Dr. Kim Tae's brilliant mind racing to understand what was happening to her. Even the vast network of dormant biological systems buried in the planet's core, all awakening in response to her presence. But most disturbing of all, she could sense their genetic structures. Every strand of DNA, every evolutionary pathway, every biological possibility lay open before her enhanced perception. And with that awareness came the terrible knowledge that she could rewrite any of it with a thought. "Captain," Kim Tae whispered, his scanner forgotten in his hands. "Your neural activity is off the charts, but your body temperature is dropping to match the ambient environment. It's like you're becoming part of the planet itself." High Priest Vextar stepped back, his blue life flame flickering with awe and terror. The final binding is complete. No Ashanti champion has ever survived even the first fragment, yet this human has taken all three in lives. Elder Yuldar crawled closer on his hands and knees, his ancient voice cracking with emotion. Tell us, Bone Bearer. Tell us what Ulthic's final thoughts revealed. Nara opened her eyes, and they now glowed with the same inner light as the bone walls around them. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated through the chamber like music. Ulthut died believing that consciousness was the greatest gift in the universe and the greatest responsibility. Its creators saw awareness as just another tool to be exploited, but Ulthak understood that true consciousness meant the power to choose. And choice means nothing without the freedom to choose wrongly. The bone crown pulsed against her forehead, sharing more of Ulthak's memories. She saw the vast biological programs hidden throughout the galaxy, designed not to create perfect species, but to nurture the potential for growth and change. The Ashanti had been given strength and pride, but also the capacity for wisdom. Humanity had been given curiosity and compassion, but also the ability to make terrible mistakes. Every species influenced by Ulthak's final gift was intended to grow beyond their initial programming, she continued. The Ashanti were meant to evolve past conquest, to use their strength to protect rather than dominate. Humanity was meant to explore not just space, but the moral implications of their discoveries. War Master Korth's voice crackled through the communication system, harsh with desperation. Enough of this heresy. The human's presence has activated forbidden systems across 17 worlds. Ancient biological programs are awakening, threatening to destabilize the entire sector. She must be destroyed before her contamination spreads. Further, the warriors in the chamber raised their weapons, but their movements seemed sluggish to Nara's enhanced perception. She could see the electromagnetic patterns of their neural firing, predict their actions before they were consciously decided. More than that, she could sense the biological override codes written into their genetic structure, the same codes that would allow her to rewrite their very nature if she chose. The temptation was overwhelming. She could make them peaceful with a thought, eliminate the aggression that drove their warrior culture. She could redesign their entire society, create a perfect civilization where conflict was impossible. But as the seductive whisper of absolute power filled her mind, Lieutenant Li Bo's voice cut through the divine static from the shuttle above. Captain, remember who you are. Remember why we came here. The simple words broke through the intoxicating rush of godlike abilities. Nara was a starship captain, an archaeologist who had come to this world seeking knowledge, not power. She was human, with all the flaws and limitations that implied. And that humanity was not a weakness to be transcended, but a strength to be preserved. She could reshape the Ashanti into perfect beings, but that would make her no different from Ulthak's original masters. The power to remake others, according to her vision, was the same tyranny that had driven the ancient bioengineer to choose death over slavery. Stand down, she said to the warriors, her voice carrying new authority, but not compulsion. I'm not your enemy. You wear the bones of our God. One of them shouted, You corrupt the sacred site with your alien presence. I wear the bones of a slave who chose freedom over power, Nara replied. And I'm making the same choice. To their amazement, she began to remove the bone fragments. First the crown, its removal sending shockwaves through the planetary systems that had awakened at her touch. Then the spine section, its disconnection causing the crystal formations above to dim slightly. Finally, she unfastened the chest piece, though she kept it in her hands rather than setting it aside completely. What are you doing? Vextar asked, his voice filled with confusion. You have achieved what no Ashanti champion ever could. You have been accepted by the divine essence. Why do you reject such power? Because power without choice is tyranny, Nara replied. And choice without the freedom to choose wrongly is meaningless. Ulthuk understood that. Its final gift wasn't the ability to control other species, but the opportunity for all species to choose their own path. Dr. Kim Tae's scanner was beeping frantically as he tried to track the energy fluctuations cascading through the chamber. Captain, by retaining contact with just one fragment, you're maintaining a connection to the planetary systems without assuming full control. It's like you're offering to guide rather than command. The implications of her choice rippled outward. From the chamber, carried by the same biological networks that had awakened at her touch. Throughout the sector, the ancient systems that had stirred to life began to stabilize, no longer threatening to destabilize established ecosystems, but offering instead the possibility of healing damaged worlds. Elder Yuldar struggled to his feet, his ancient frame somehow seeming lighter despite the weight of revelation. The prophecy spoke truly. The bone-bearer would walk among the stars, and the children of Olfak would kneel or burn. But it was never about conquest, was it? It was about the choice between wisdom and destruction. Every species gets to make that choice, Nara agreed. The Ashanti can continue their path of conquest if they choose, but they'll do so knowing. It's a choice, not a divine mandate. Or they can choose to grow beyond what they were programmed to be. War Master Korth's final transmission came through the speakers, filled with rage and promise of violence. If you will not die by divine judgment, human, then you will die by Ashanti weapons. I am coming for you, and I will not be turned aside by pretty words about choice and freedom. High Priest Vextar looked toward the chamber entrance, his expression grim. Korth represents the old ways, the interpretation of Ulthak's legacy. That has driven our expansion for 3 millennia. He will not accept that everything he believes is built on a misunderstanding. Then he'll have to make his own choice, Nara said, settling the bone fragment against her chest like a badge of office rather than a weapon of power. Just like everyone else. Above them, the sound of approaching shuttles echoed through the crystal formations. War Master Korth was coming with his elite warriors, intent on destroying the human who had shattered their understanding of divine mandate. But Captain Park Nara no longer faced that confrontation as just a human archaeologist in over her head. She faced it as the inheritor of an ancient rebel's dream, armed not with the power to control others, but with the wisdom to offer them choice. The final test was about to begin. War Master Korth descended into the skull chamber like a black storm, his elite warriors flowing around him in perfect formation. Their weapons were already charged, energy cells glowing with deadly intent. But as they entered the sacred space, something unexpected happened. They stopped. The bone walls around them pulsed with gentle light, and in that light, the warriors could see the truth that had been hidden from them for 3,000 years. The carvings told a different story than the one they had been taught, showing not a divine ruler, but a slave who had chosen death over servitude. Illusions, Korth snarled, though his voice carried less certainty than before. Human tricks designed to weaken our resolve. Captain Park Nara stood calmly in the center of the chamber, the single bone fragment resting against her chest like a badge of honor. She made no aggressive moves, carried no weapons, but something about her presence made the hardened warriors hesitate. No tricks, War Master, she said, only truth. The same truth that Ulthak died to preserve. Dr. Kim Tae stepped protectively closer to his captain, his scanner showing energy readings that defied explanation. The planetary systems were responding to the confrontation, ancient biological programs stirring throughout the sector. But instead of chaos, there was a sense of anticipation, as if the planet itself was waiting to see what choice would be made. High Priest Vextar moved between the two groups, his blue life flame burning with newfound purpose. Korth, you must listen to what she has shown us. Everything we believed about Ulthek's divine nature was wrong. We built our empire on the worship of a slave's rebellion. I will not listen to blasphemy, Korth replied, but his weapon hand trembled slightly. The chamber's revelations were affecting him despite his resistance. The Ashanti are the chosen people, granted dominion over lesser species by divine right. Without that mandate, what are we? You are what you choose to be, Nara answered. Just as Ulthek chose to die rather than continue serving masters who would pervert the gift of life. Just as I chose to give up godlike power rather than use it to force others to my will. Elder Yuldar, his ancient frame somehow strengthened by the weight of truth, stepped forward with shaking hands. From within his robes, he produced a scroll covered in symbols that seemed to writhe and shift in the bone light. The Forbiddens. Texts, he whispered, hidden for centuries because they contradicted our understanding of divine mandate. They speak of the bone bearer who would offer choice instead of conquest, who would show us that true strength lies in knowing when not to use power. Korth's warriors looked to their leader for guidance, but for the first time in his career, the War Master seemed unsure. The comfortable certainties that had driven Ashanti expansion were crumbling around him, replaced by questions that had no easy answers. If we are not the chosen people, one of the warriors asked, then what right do we have to rule over others? The same right any species has, Nara replied. The right to make choices and live with the consequences. The right to grow beyond your original programming and become something new. Lieutenant Li Bo's voice crackled through the communication system from the shuttle above. Captain, I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the sector. It's like entire star systems are awakening, but in a controlled way. Whatever you're doing down there, it's spreading. Kinte checked his readings and nodded confirmation. The biological programs Ulthek embedded in its bone structure are activating across 17 worlds. But instead of chaos, they're offering healing. Damaged ecosystems are beginning to repair themselves. Extinct species are showing signs of genetic resurrection. The implications hit everyone in the chamber at the same moment. The power that Nara had briefly wielded, the ability to reshape life itself, was now being offered freely to every world that had been touched by Ulthek's influence, not as conquest or control, but as the opportunity for renewal and growth. Choose, Nara said to Korth and his warriors. You can fight to preserve the old ways, continue your path of conquest and domination. The bone fragment I carry gives me the power to stop you, to rewrite your genetic code and make you peaceful whether you want to be or not. But that would make me no different from Ulthek's as original masters. She reached up and unfastened the bone fragment from her chest, holding it out toward Korth. Or you can choose to grow beyond what you are programmed to be. Take this fragment, learn what Ulthek truly intended, and help me build something better than an empire based on force. The War Master stared at the offered bone, his black eyes reflecting the chamber's light. In that light, he could see the genetic templates that had shaped his species, could understand for the first time that Ashanti aggression was not a divine gift, but a survival adaptation that had outlived its usefulness. What would you have us become? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Gardeners, Nara replied. Ulthek's true heirs. Species working together to nurture life throughout the galaxy instead of consuming it. One by one, Korth's warriors laid down their weapons. The revelations in the chamber had shown them a different path, one that required courage of a different kind than they had ever known. Instead of the courage to conquer, they would need the courage to nurture. Instead of the strength to destroy, they would need the wisdom to create. But Korth himself remained standing, his weapon still charged and ready. And if I refuse? If I choose to preserve the old ways, then you choose, Nara said simply. And you live with the consequences. But you do so knowing that it's a choice, not a divine mandate. The War Master looked around the chamber at his warriors, at the high priest and elder who had found new purpose in truth, at the human female who had given up godlike power for the sake of freedom. Slowly, his weapon powered down. I have spent my life believing that strength meant the ability to impose my will on others, he said. Perhaps it is time to learn what strength truly means. He took the bone fragment from Nara's hands, and as it touched his skin, his consciousness expanded to encompass Ulthok's true legacy. Not the divine right to rule, but the responsibility to nurture. Not the power to consume worlds, but the wisdom to help them flourish. 6 months later, Captain Park Nara stood in the observation dome of Covenant Station, watching ships from dozens of species work together to restore a world scarred by centuries of warfare. The bone fragment hung around her neck on a simple chain, no longer a weapon of power, but a reminder of responsibility. Dr. Kim Tae approached with his daily report. Ashanti agricultural teams had successfully reintroduced 17 extinct species to the Kepler system. War Master Korth says they're ahead of schedule on the ecosystem restoration project. Former War Master, Nara corrected with a smile. He prefers Garden Master now. Through the viewport, she could see Ashanti and human crews working side by side, using Ulthok's biological templates, not to create weapons or impose control, but to heal worlds that had been damaged by millennia of conflict. Other species were joining the Covenant daily, drawn not by the promise of conquest, but by the opportunity to build something better. The bones of an ancient god had taught the galaxy a simple lesson. True power lay not in the ability to control others, but in the wisdom to offer them choice. And sometimes, the greatest choice of all was knowing when not to use the power you possessed. In the garden dome, below the observation deck, seedlings from 100 worlds grew and carefully tended. Soil. Each one represented a choice made freely, a species deciding to nurture rather than consume, to build rather than destroy. The rebellion that had begun with Ulthok's refusal to serve tyrannical masters continued in every seed that took root, in every world that chose cooperation over conquest, in every being that looked up at the stars and saw not territory to be claimed, but gardens waiting to be tended. Captain Park Nara had worn the bones of an alien god and gained not their power, but their respect. And in doing so, she had helped the galaxy remember what it meant to be truly alive.